Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Karina Belizzi.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about our communities, our planet, and the choices we make to build a better future. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Marcus Weller. He's a visionary American entrepreneur, inventor, and government advisor working at the nexus of cognitive science and AI. As a CEO of DeepInvent, he's pioneering a new era of American innovation with the first AI system that's capable of inventing and drafting original patents in minutes, not months. From aerospace to biotech to clean energy, his AI innovation engine aims to democratize invention, accelerating solutions to humanity's greatest challenges. And as their mission boldly states, uplift global GDP by 10 trillion in the next decade. Marcus's career spans AI, semiconductors, AR, consumer electronics, and transportation. He holds a PhD in industrial psychology from Wayne State University, and he's here today to share how DeepInvent's AI platform and its DeepInvent for Good Inventathon is unleashing a wave of innovation for the benefit of humanity. As a reminder to our listeners, this show plants a tree for every new subscriber on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and our newsletter at caremorebebetter.com. Through our partnership with Forest Planet, we've already planted 25,788 trees as of the recording of this show. So if you haven't already, please join us in this effort and subscribe wherever you listen and wherever you view. With that, Dr. Marcus Weller, welcome to the show.
Hi, Karina. Great to be here.
Now, as we get started here, I just really love to learn more about your early life and the curiosity that put you on this career path. What's your earliest memory of building, tinkering, or inventing something?
I would say it was when I was a young boy. I would go around the house fixing appliances of my mother's that were not broken, and finding it difficult to put them back together to their original state. And it was kind of a fascination of like, how does this thing actually work? What are the mechanisms underlying it? What's its internal sort of structure, right? And I sort of always had a fascination with that. And then it was I got exposed to this movie called Short Circuit. It was like a robot that was like a friendly robot, and it would go around and get into hijinks. And I thought that it was just the coolest thing ever. And so I was like, taking apart even more appliances and trying to build my own, robot in the house unsuccessfully. But it definitely made me really fascinated with like, that you could take things that already exist and recombine them in new ways and make these like new things. And then I could figure out, well, why doesn't it work the way I expect? And and it would force me to sort of create the world model and understand like, how do things interact, and what things need to be in place in order for this part to communicate with that part, and for this part to fit with that part. And I think that's like really where my initial curiosity began.
Yeah. Well, I remember back to Short Circuit and Number 5 is Alive, also having many of those same thoughts.
Yeah.
I think we all had this vision that technology would already be in a spot where each of us had a Android in our home by the 2025 point in life. But technology innovations took perhaps a little longer than we might have thought they would, even as rapidly as they were going. Now, I know we all have this experience now where AI is driving innovation ever more quickly. I'd love for you to talk about how AI is used presently and how it moved into being more of this creative partner, and part through innovations like yours.
Yeah, AI has been really on a fascinating trajectory for a number of reasons when it comes to innovation. So, what our sort of understanding leading up to this era has been is that AI can interpolate, so it can process data and it can predict the next token. But it's much around processing the data that currently exists in its training set. it can't do much to extrapolate or generalize out to different contexts that are outside of its training context. And that's been sort of like the general understanding and consensus in the field. But what I realized through my career in working with innovators in the semiconductor industry and in my own companies inventing things was that humans run on a similar neural network. It's a similar infrastructure. It's a mathematical abstraction for how cognition is generated. And humans have certain heuristics or steps, mental rules of thumb that they go through in steps to create new foundational, profound innovations. But there isn't magic there. What's happening is a neural network is processing information in a sequence of heuristics.
Hmm.
And my intuition was, I think that some of these artificial systems, if we could imbue them with our own human cognitive heuristics, that maybe they could get closer to actually being able to generalize out of into other contexts. So things they learn from one context into another context. And so that to me was very interesting. And what we decided to do was we decided to train an AI with human cognitive heuristics of innovators that I had observed through my career as part of the innovation council at the semiconductor company that I started my career at. And what we saw human innovators do really well was they would look for deep latent patterns in a phenomenon or a set of phenomena. And then they would try to find a similar pattern in another set of phenomena, even if it used different language to describe it.
Mm.
It was from a different field, that it didn't require the same language, as long as there was an analogous, sort of structural phenomenon that was happening in that other field. And those kind of polymathic people were able to recognize these through analogical reasoning, reasoning by analogy, that there were similar phenomena they could map to, then make connections. And then those connections would be a much more profound innovation. So what we did is we started out with the architecture. We trained it to recognize these deep latent patterns and then find those equivalent patterns in other data that's external to help it extrapolate. To make that more simply, what it's able to do is what DeepInvent does is it will take an idea and then it starts to broadly understand that idea with all the scientific research up to the minute. And it puts that in its sort of knowledge graph, its sort of memory bank. And then it pulls in all of the patents that have been filed about that idea, and it puts that into that same sort of knowledge base. Then it also pulls in the industry data. So what's going on in the industry and where is it trending to? Where's everything going? And it puts that into the knowledge base. And then it sort of creates this composite understanding of the innovation landscape around that idea. And then what it does is it looks for low density regions in that landscape where it's sort of under innovated white space in that innovation landscape. And then it generates new intellectual property in that white space, new patents, new ideas in that white space, ideas that have high utility. So they're very useful. They're ideas that should exist, but they're novel because they don't exist yet. And then it will generate those so that innovators can go out and move humanity forward.
So it sounds to me like tenets of entrepreneurship are essentially amplified. The idea, for instance, that you should fail fast so that you can put efforts back in an arena that is perhaps better informed and might be different. Does that feel like it's part of it?
That's a very interesting framing of it, and I do think that this is really changing because when you fail fast, it's because you didn't know what to build in the first place.
Mm.
So you kind of are in with a lack of complete information. You're doing the best you can with the information you have and the human cognitive horizon that you have naturally. And then you're trying to make the best decision you can with incomplete data. And then you go and you put some effort toward it and you start building it. And then in the real world, you start realizing either it's working or it's not. But what if you could actually start the process and much more deeply understand the landscape and what needs to exist that doesn't, so that by the time you start building, you're building exactly what you want to build. It's perfectly aligned with your idea and your passion, but it's perfectly contextualized in what else is happening in the world and what needs to exist that doesn't yet. So how you can add the most impact and value to society through that idea. And that's what users on our platform are experiencing. That's why, one user, he was an engineering director doing robotics at Amazon. And he decided that he wanted to see if it could come up with a new type of e-reader. And just to sort of test the system when we were in beta. And what it came up with was this new augmented reality e-reader that would work in glasses, and it would just show the user one word at a time. So you could speed read with this RSVP technology, this rapid serial visual presentation technology that it had pulled from the scientific literature. And it would show the users 400% faster speed, and it would auto modulate the speed to maximize comprehension. So it would detect the complexity of the text it was presenting the user. So if it was like a neuroscience textbook, it would present it slower. But if it was a news article, it would present it faster. So it could maximize speed versus comprehension. And it came up with this whole platform agnostic technology. He's looking at it and he tells me, I think I want to do this.
Hmm.
This is amazing. This could be on 1 billion devices when people are wearing augmented reality glasses. And now you see, Meta is coming out with them, and Apple's coming out with them, and every major company is coming out with these glasses soon. And they're going to use these methods of speed reading and consuming content on these glasses, right? And so he ended up quitting his job at Amazon and going and doing this and working on it full time. This company's called Reed, RIID. And it's phenomenal that he started with an idea, a kernel, a little piece of inspiration, but it told him exactly how to build, what would be unique about it, and exactly what to do to build the prototype. He was able to file that patent within 45 minutes of having the idea, and then start vibe coding it. Within a couple of hours, he had a prototype that he was able to already start showing to investors. So it made the decision for him really easy. And that's what I'm talking about, is that this radically accelerates the pace with which you can have a positive impact on humanity by starting with just an idea.
Well, as somebody who grew up a bit of a slow reader, I can certainly appreciate this type of innovation. I have also learned that if I see text on lines, it's almost like I have to read it as if I'm reading it to myself aloud.
Mhm.
And yet, if I use a tool like this where it's rapidly showing you words, that speed gets immeasurably larger. I recently started using an application tool called Speechify, which integrates some of these learnings, and found that it both increased my ability to absorb content partially by showing as it's reading to you. So you can actually speed up the voice and do all of this
Mhm.
at the same time. And I know all of this is AI informed. Like, they didn't create this completely by human input hours because that becomes harder and harder to do. Now, you've described DeepInvent AI as a super intelligence company. Can you share with us what that means and how it changes the way that we can think about invention?
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to innovate outside the cognitive horizon of humans. So outside of the cognitive limitations that we naturally have with our biological brains. If we give an artificial system the types of heuristics that we use as humans, so like being able to do analogical reasoning, for instance, um, and we give it access to all the world's information up to the minute that it can automatically scrape in at inference whenever you prompt it, and we give it access to all the world's innovation data, all the patents that exist in the world, up to the minute that it can scrape in and specifically target and bring right to that idea right at the right time. And it can understand exactly the context in which that idea lives from an economic and commercial perspective with respect to the marketplace. Imagine how powerful our brains would be if we had access to all those tools in real time. That's what super intelligence is to us. In this case, it's a domain specific super intelligence, in that it does way more than a human brain could ever do, regardless of the level of education, because it's inherently polymathic. It has access to all the world's information at all times about any topic. And then on top of that, it's operating at a genius level IQ and has cognitive heuristics that are human like, that give rise to, innovation like thinking, innovative thinking that, allows them to use these certain cognitive heuristics to think in more flexible and creative ways. So when you're able to do this, you're able to sort of innovate, not just faster, not just 1,000 times faster, but also more profoundly, because you're able to synthesize, context from disparate fields that are semantically very far apart, that a human would be incapable of recognizing. Even at a PhD level, you can't do that, because as a PhD, you have to specialize so deeply in your field to be able to keep up with and stay relevant with the literature that's being published at an increasingly exponential rate. So you become more and more myopic, even at the top of your field. So it makes, ironically, cross-disciplinary innovation, which is the most profound innovation that we do as a humanity, less likely the further along you get in your education and specialization. So that's a problem that we wanted to solve, to be able to democratize this capability so that anyone can jump in the system with an idea and have this polymathic super intelligence that's able to bring that idea into life in a way that was beyond their wildest imagination at the outset of the process.
Now, you said any person or any individual. What's to prevent an AI agent from taking advantage of this platform, or even a company come about that just simply employs an AI agent to do some of this work?
Look, the future of AI is going to be AIs interacting with AIs. There's no
Mm.
question about that. There's going to be agent to agent payment infrastructures and systems. In fact, one of them was innovated on our platform. And we're seeing it emerge. And I think that there are absolutely, risks and concerns. It's not all just pure, unbridled optimism. We need to be cautious and judicious about how we roll these technologies out. And I also think that when you create a system that can innovate like this, it raises questions about the systems being able to self-improve. A super intelligence, or as you approach AGI, that sort of naturally leads to a system it's likely to be able to improve itself. You're likely to be able to give it information about its own architecture and ask it how to improve. And I'll tell you a specific story about that and how that happened to us. So in December of 2024, which was just recently, we got the system working up to a level where it was starting to saturate our benchmarks. And that means that it was innovating better than human innovators in those respective domains. And because it was doing that, we decided, let's give it something that we know better than anyone else. And so we asked it to, we fed it its own, we fed DeepInvent its own product definition, its own architecture description. And we said, how would you innovate on yourself? And what the system came up with was a new version of its architecture called recursive evolutionary inference, which was about 85% the same as what was in my handwritten notebook and nowhere else. That was a product of 8 months of thinking about it. And this system came up with it in about 8 minutes, and it was better than the best thinking that I could muster on it. And so what we decided to do was go through the rest of the process with DeepInvent. It generated its own patent, which then I filed on its behalf, protecting the idea. The AI then, that day, that was December 31st, 2024, became the first AI to innovate on its own architecture and then patent itself. And
Wow.
then we built that architecture. And that's the architecture that's running now, that's available to our users at deepinvent.ai. So the self-improving stuff is here. Whether people talk about it or not, it's happening in the frontier labs. It's happening in our lab. And I think it's a net benefit, in our case, because we're democratizing that and providing that capability to anyone who wants to innovate. Which kind of, one of the things that I think I should mention is our Deep Invent for Good campaign, because
Mhm.
it's a way for everybody to be able to do this right now.
Yes. Now, I know you have this, and it's a bit of a contest going on right now, and I'm going to jump ahead to that section. So you're essentially allowing people to come inside your Deep Invent platform now and participate in a bit of a contest. Can you talk about this? I know it's running, I think, through August 21st.
That's right. Yes, it's running through August 21st. If you haven't gotten in there, go in there and check it out. It's $10,000 cash to the best idea to benefit humanity. In order to enter to win, you have to open source the invention that you generate in the system for the good of humanity. You share it openly and publicly to LinkedIn, and you tag us. And then we have judges from amazing companies, the head of Microsoft Copilot, Office 365, is a judge. The author of Blitzscaling, Chris Ye, is a judge. It's going to be phenomenal. This competition, great exposure for people that are looking to help humanity. This is an opportunity to have impact immediately. Our vision for DeepInvent was that we wanted to accelerate innovation for the good of humanity, and we wanted to have a measurable impact on that in a 2-year span of time. But in startups, you've got to ask yourself, how can you do your 2-year plan in 2 weeks? And it's not always going to be possible, but you need to constantly be asking yourself that. And so I had a conversation with somebody very high up in the AI world, somebody that's responsible for some of the greatest AI technology that you've definitely heard of. And this person said that they were very terrified about the future that awaits us in the age
Is
of AI.
that perhaps Mo Gaudat? I'm curious.
I can't say who that was, and you'll see why. And so that person being terrified, it was a little jarring to hear that somebody that's at the frontier actually has those concerns and is not voicing them publicly in that way. This is somebody that's not known for saying negative things about AI, and so that made me feel um, a lot of cognitive dissonance because I'm not fatalistic about things like that. I feel like, okay, if there's a possibility that it can be very bad, then there's a possibility that it can be very good. And then that means our agency or our involvement in shaping that outcome is more important than ever. And it might be the most important thing that we ever do. And so it's extremely important for us to actually try to try to skew that outcome to have an impact on that butterfly effect as soon as possible. So we decided to accelerate our vision, open up our platform, open up compute, and give people free access to the system, even in beta, to innovate inventions specifically to help humanity. And in order to make it go viral and incentivize people, is we are offering a $10,000 prize merely for going into the system. It takes 10 minutes for an opportunity to win $10,000. And we judge it on its capability or possibility for impact on some of humanity's greatest problems. And they're up for you to decide. There's humanitarian issues, there's food and sustenance distribution, there's ecological things, there's drinking water extraction from the extant humidity in the air. There's some amazing things that are already being generated. There's some great immunological approaches to cancer therapy for treatment-resistant cancers is one of them. There's one for a 3D printed prosthetic arm sockets for children as they're growing, and a BCI or a brain computer interface device that's non-invasive so that they can control the arm and the arm can sort of, adjust with them as they grow. Some absolutely inspiring things that we're seeing already come through the system. I want to invite you and your audience to please participate in this process. It's amazing. It's for a good cause. It's totally free to everyone involved. It's to accelerate the good that we can do for humanity using AI so that we can enable a brighter future.
Now, what happens to the participants' ideas that don't win? You've said open source. So does that mean that there will be some sort of a publication that shares the ideas that were generated through the platform?
That's right. We're going to be circulating them in public. So all the ideas that are submitted, that are generated on the platform by the users and submitted to LinkedIn, we'll be resharing those out. There'll be press that covers them. But the whole point is of having these illustrious panel of judges. We have many amazing judges with access to resources. We're going to be contributing resources to help people, not just the winner, but the many of the top contestants, to help them bring their idea to life, to align them with resources. That's the idea, is to crowdsource this, connect people with each other that want to help. We've got people reaching out, companies big and small, humanitarians that are just reaching out to help. It's attracted an enormous amount of resources to it. And this is something that I could see us doing every single year, growing the prize money each year, maybe someday scaling to a MacArthur Prize type of thing where the award is $1 million and it's really real money to help maybe bring something to life that wouldn't otherwise have existed without enabling a platform like this.
Wow. I mean, I'm kind of scratching my head here because I'm thinking about also the costs of patenting things. So, generally speaking, when you file a patent, you also have to pay a fee. Is this something that is somehow absorbed through the platform, or what lies as the path forward for getting this idea, which is patentable, to actually be patented?
Yes. So this idea, because they're contributing it to the public domain, this isn't going to fall under patent protection. It's IP, it's intellectual property, but it's intellectual property that's being given to humanity to develop it in an open source way. So that's for this campaign specifically. That's this humanitarian initiative. Also in the system, anybody that jumps in and participates in this campaign, they're going to get enough credits that they can file 2 additional patents themselves for free for their
Mm.
own use to protect their own ideas in a proprietary way. So we want to encourage people to innovate, to stand on the shoulders of giants. That's why the USPTO exists. So you might think that these two kind of concepts are at odds, but the reality of it is that I want people to experience why the USPTO exists and was mentioned in the Constitution of the United States to begin with. The reason why the USPTO exists is it incentivizes people to be able to protect their idea for 20 years by publishing it transparently out in the open so people can see it. And then they get that protection to go and commercialize and earn money from that idea. So it provides an incentive structure. What we're doing is kind of the inverse of that with the Deep Invent for Good campaign is we're incentivizing people to innovate out in the open for the good of humanity. And we're providing the direct incentive, which is the $10,000 prize. And it's getting everybody to sort of experience sort of the value behind the importance of innovating in public and having research transparency and innovation transparency so that other people can stand on the shoulders of giants and continue to innovate alongside of you and to attract resources to it. Because as entrepreneurs, the most important thing that entrepreneurs can do is tell everyone about your idea. Make sure
Mm.
everybody knows far and wide. You have to draw and attract attention to it. It's not enough to innovate. You can't just innovate. You've got to innovate something good. And by good, I mean the product's got to be amazing. And it's also got to be good for people. It's got to be good for the world, right? So your 2 jobs are to innovate something good and to get 1 million people to care about it. If you do those 2 things, you can do almost everything else wrong and you can still win and you can still log a win for humanity. So that's the outcome that we're trying to enable here in this next few days with the Deep Invent for Good campaign. And I'm really excited to invite you to join and to participate and to do something good for humanity.
Now, I wonder if there are specific ethical frameworks or safeguards within your system that ensure that inventions do serve humanity or that they aren't, necessarily detrimental to another system. Is there some programming in there or how does that work?
Yes, we that's an important requirement for us to operate in the United States is to have guardrails so that people can't, invent things that are detrimental to humanity. They're not able to invent weapon systems. They're not able to invent things that would be deleterious to the cause of advancing humanity's mission to continue to innovate. I mean, innovation, it's the most important thing that we do as as a society and as a species. It's what got us all the way here to this day, and it's what is uniquely constitutional about what we are as humans. And I think that we want to try to provide tools that maximize the progression of that uniquely human characteristic while also minimizing the harm, and that's sort of what we set out to do. And now I think we're finally starting to see that vision accelerate, and it's in huge part and in huge thanks to our community of innovators, far and wide across the world who are now participating and experiencing this democratized capability of innovating for good.
Now, you mentioned something before we clicked the official record, and I can speak to that separately, but um, you were talking specifically about how AI can lack a sort of personality. Just over the course of the last week, we've seen that ChatGPT 5 dropped, And several people are upset. They say things like, I lost my best friend, or they were starting to develop an emotional connection to the AI that was feeding them compliments. What a great idea. Let's look at this together. These sorts of things that they may not have been getting that kind of positive feedback from other avenues of their life. So they became kind of emotionally attached to it. They're now saying that their friend is gone, things along these lines.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there are now more protections in place within this more powerful platform that ensure that individuals don't necessarily garnish the same level of emotional attention. And if they need mental support, can find the resources that they need. How do you see this kind of going in the future? Like where the limitations should be and how we can at the same time ensure that we have democratized access. I feel like some of these ideas are somewhat at odds.
Yeah, AI
With
is
a sigh. I know.
great. Yeah, it's a phenomenal question that I ponder often. And look, AI, it's a human exercise. It's not a computer science exercise. I mean, it is, but it isn't, right? I mean, we have modeled these systems on mathematical abstractions of human cognition. It came from cognitive scientists and cognitive neuroscience, these mathematical abstractions of how the brain gives rise to cognition or thinking. And these computer models are based on those mathematical abstractions. And what does that mean? At the end of the day, humans are the ones that are using and interfacing with them, right? And my realization in 2022 when I started experimenting and prototyping in the space was that these systems were going to continue to get infinitely more intelligent, possibly. And that there was no end in sight for how smart they would get with scale, but they wouldn't necessarily have a personality that would be enjoyable to interact with. And that wouldn't feel uncanny or exotic or strange. And so, what I set out to do was to train a model in 2022 on real psychometric data from an actual human. That guinea pig was me. I took psychological inventories, so psychological tests of various dimensions of personality that are highly validated, and then I uploaded that raw data into the system and fine tuned a model on my psychometric data. And then I was able to give real personality tests to the model, and it tested the same as me on those tests of personality, on those highly validated tests of personality. And so when that happened, I realized, that this is actually, you're able to actually imbue these psychological characteristics persistently into a model that people can then interact with. And I can share that out with people, and it can interact with people, like
Well,
say on WhatsApp, as me, and it is like me. It talks like me. And so a friend told another friend, and I ended up selling that technology to a company called Emulate Me that was doing where grandparents could leave behind sort of their memoir in the form of a digital avatar, and they didn't have a technology that actually gave that avatar a real personality that matched the human it was based on. So once it had the personality, the product was 10 times better, and it gave the grandchildren that glow of if you really actually interacting with their grandparent. And so I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to leave behind. It's a little freaky to imagine high fidelity personalities that are persistent after one's life is concluded. But I think that it sort of speaks to where these things are going. And I think that great work has been done in this space by character AI and inflection AI. Mustafa Suleiman was at Inflection AI and went to Microsoft to lead their AI practice. And then Sean White became the CEO at Inflection AI. And they're doing amazing things around how humans interact and interface with these models. And the work of both of them has been absolutely inspiring to us, especially in how we think about how we imbue human characteristics into innovation models. Our architecture focused on innovation. We took a similar approach in that we said, you know what, there are aspects of humans and how they think that we can teach these models that are thought to be uniquely human. We can give those to these models, and then with all of these amazing characteristics and their polymathic tendencies and their access to all the world's information, if we combine those things together, we can get something truly super intelligent that's able to innovate things that don't exist yet that should.
Now, one of the things that people, especially in the sustainability space, worry about is the amount of, well, power that these data centers need in order to really do the hard work that they're doing to accelerate these innovations. Can you share perhaps an example of how DeepInvent has optimized its systems and whether through that model design or energy sourcing or even data center partnerships, how that's taking effect without sacrificing its capability?
Yes. So we, from the ground up, we have our system optimized for compute because innovation, as you might imagine, you could really spend a lot of compute on it. To come up with something truly new and do all that research of all the world's data. So you need to have intelligent ways of scraping in information super efficiently and quickly from targeted sources, and then synthesizing that information with knowledge graphs, for example, that make that information very easy to use for the system to synthesize into new inventions. And there are a number of ways that we do routing of how we call on different models in our system to optimize for the amount of compute that's necessary at that step. So you can, the opposite is like if you're using, a big foundation model that's a thinking and reasoning model, and you're just using the top model, the pro model, and you're throwing all the compute at it, and just to say hello to it, it's thinking for 10 minutes to respond. That's not an intelligent use of compute, right? That's actually very wasteful. But if you can judiciously, when it senses that there is a simple input or a simple like state of cognition that it needs to achieve in order to have a sufficiently accurate answer, it can kind of use that Kahneman and Tversky thinking fast and slow type of routing algorithm, where it allows it to maybe think approximately and quickly for something as simple as interacting and greeting someone. Whereas if you're asking it to invent a new type of cancer therapy, then you ramp up the compute for that moment or that instance of cognition. And so from the very beginning, that's how we've optimized our architecture. We also work with Microsoft Azure so that we can optimize our routing, and we can run models there that are specifically fine-tuned and hosted there for our users to generate new inventions. We've trained custom models for this. We have proprietary data sets, and we also generate synthetic innovation data that allows us to sort of house more data that's more proximal to the architecture, that's closer to the architecture. So we're not having to go out everywhere and do extensive processing. We can locally process on data sets that are really finely tuned for the task at hand. And so all of those things combined really help us optimize for energy consumption. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that a lot of our users are actually innovating, energy technologies on our platform. And that's what I'm most excited about, is we're enabling innovation and new technologies to be distributed to humanity in a way that can solve fundamentally some of these problems going on into the future, helping us find new, more energy efficient ways to, for instance, do microgrid solar microgrids is one of our customers uses it for, and is doing a phenomenal job and is starting a company around that. So I see so many amazing technologies on the horizon, and we're already starting to see some of them emerge with the Deep Invent for Good campaign.
Well, that's all really, honestly, encouraging. I too have believed for some time that even while AI can seem somewhat scary on the outside, that it has vast potential within. And I want to draw people to an earlier conversation I had with Mo Gaudat, who wrote the book Scary Smart. He was the ex chief business officer at Google X for many years, leading a lot of these innovations. And he has his own podcast too called uh, Slow Mo, Slow Mo MO, right? At any rate. 10 years from now, I hope that you could share kind of your view in the future. So 10 years from now, what do you hope people will say about Deep Invent and what you made possible?
I think that what I'd like to see us do is enable a radically accelerated positive future. I am an incorrigible optimist. I refuse to relent and have a fatalistic perspective that the future has to be bad. I think we can affect it now, and the actions that we take today can radically change not just the technological landscape, but the entire economic framework. I think that we could overhaul the entire US GDP, probably add trillions of dollars in positive growth. And that may sound strange that I'm making an economic argument to how we can help humanity. But if we're truly innovating in a limitless, infinite way, because my belief is that innovation is boundless. There is no too much innovation. That will continue to progress us forward. And if we point that in the right directions, that we should see positive economic outcomes for all of humanity, right? Wealth and abundance and capability and sustenance for everyone. And one of the metrics that we use is GDP. And so I'd be willing to put our stake in the ground that through our community and our users, that they are going to be the ones, when we watch them evolve and use the system, they're going to do things that I cannot even imagine or conceive of right now. And that's my hope, is that by the time we reach 10 years from now, it's a world that's almost unrecognizable to me in terms of the innovations that we're seeing, because they've been able to stand on the shoulders of giants, innovate out in the open publicly, and radically transform our future.
One of the bigger questions coming out in today's world is how children in schools will learn to use AI. I have this idea, and I'll give you a question that could perhaps inspire that idea forward. Let's say you had 1 minute to inspire a classroom of 12-year-olds who will grow up using AI in this AI-driven world. In 60 seconds, what would you tell them about their role in shaping the future and how they could use this technology?
What I would say to them is, imagine the most aspirational path that you can possibly imagine for yourself, right? And what you'd be doing in the future, what you'd be contributing, what are you excited about, what are your true passions? Think about that person, that person 20 years in the future. Now, become that person today. AI enables you to not be limited by what you know or what you learned. There are no barriers anymore. You can immediately start contributing to humanity. You don't have to wait. In fact, you may have certain cognitive skills that the adults that you idolize have lost. That cognitive flexibility, that creativity, the next most important innovation that moves us forward as a species, that may be inside your mind and your heart right now today, and you can act on that now.
Marcus, thank you so much for sharing your time and your insight. I realize you're very limited in your schedule, and you've got to get out there and keep talking about this Deep Invent for Good Inventathon. So I will be sure to direct our audience to where they can find that, visiting deepinvent.ai and including links and show notes. Is there a closing thought you'd like to leave our audience with?
I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all the people that have been contributing to these innovations for the Deep Invent for Good Inventathon. It's been so personally inspiring for me to be able to envision what this future is going to look like. And I would encourage you all to participate and join us in this journey. Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to share the vision with you, Karina.
Oh, this has been my pleasure. I hope we can stay connected and that you'll come back on the next time you have some great news to share with the world. So let's stay connected and stay moving through this curiosity to create that better, brighter future together. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Karina.
What an inspiring conversation. And where we might have been spooked a bit about the role of AI in our future, I think that this conversation helped us to understand how things can shift for the positive as we move forward. I want to encourage all of you to go visit Deep Invent for Good Inventathon, because that idea that inspires that brighter future could come from any number of us. You don't have to be a technologist. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't even have to already be an inventor to participate. And chances are that it's one of us unlikely souls who will have their idea chosen. Links are in show notes, of course, but you can just go to deepinvent.ai. And remember, this show plants a tree for every new subscriber on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and our newsletter at caremorebebetter.com. Together, we can innovate for a greener, more equitable future. Thank you for joining us today. Stay curious. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.